What's up? Angela Mosley here. Go ahead and pop a squat, not quite literally. Come on and join me in this conversation about rectocele prolapse, constipation, and your pelvic floor. In today's video, because I get this question asked more often than not, we're going to talk about nutrition, hydration, bathroom habits, and how your pelvic floor is limiting your bowels from being moved. All right, we're going to talk about daily habits that you could do so that we can work on eliminating constipation, because constipation, if you have a rectocele prolapse, then you know that it is probably the number one cause that increases your prolapse symptoms. So go ahead, pop a squat and join me down on the mat or on a bench chair, whatever you want to call it, and let's get started. Okay, so first let's cover nutrition, because that is probably the number one step that somebody might do when it comes to constipation. And as someone myself who has studied nutrition, both for myself, but also to help coach women in fat loss and prolapse and pelvic floor and all the things, I want to make sure that we cover this basis, because a lot of women will say, well, I've done this and I've done that, but I'm still constipated. I'm still experiencing prolapse symptoms. So this is the first step that I want us to look at, is nutrition and hydration. So I call it my FPF method. So it's fiber-filled carbs, protein, and fats. We're not going to talk about proteins and fats today. We're just going to focus on those fiber-filled carbs, which helps with gut health. And if it helps with gut health, then that means that you're going to have a good, healthy bowel movement. All right. So the number one thing that you want to track is your bowel habits. How often are you going? And what it looks like. I've posted the link to the Bristol stool chart down below, so you can take a peek at the chart and you can decide, what does your stool look like. It's very important to track your bladder habits, because they're going to change, of course, according to your menstrual cycle as well. A lot of women like to call it the period poos. So right before you get your period, it's going to be a little bit softer, and that's because of the drop in the hormones and the increase in hormones and all the things preparing your body to get your period. So that's very normal. But outside of that, we want to make sure that we have more of a snake-like or smooth-like bowel movement, and our bowel movements should happen pretty regularly. So the very first step that we look at is our nutrition. And when we look at carbohydrates, so number one, carbs are a good thing. We need healthy carbs for gut health, we need healthy carbs for fiber, and we need healthy carbs for lifting weights, for exercise. Our body uses carbohydrates as the fuel source to maintain your energy throughout your workout. So if you've been told this whole entire time to avoid carbs, I want to give you that blessing to say, please, let's incorporate some carbs into your diet, especially if you are having constipation. So number one thing we want to look at is some of the most high value, or not high value, but the carbohydrates that have the fiber filled. So they're fiber filled carbohydrates. And so I've provided a fiber guide down below for you as well. Just make a copy of it. It's right in Google Drive. You read more about fiber and the types of foods that have higher fiber. Now you can always use a nutrition app and scan up a product, or we want to go for more whole foods, but if you're using boxed items such as pasta or rice, you can read right on the label how much fiber it has. As women, we should aim for 25 grams of fiber per day. And so how I personally break this down is I like to aim for 5 grams of fiber per meal. So if I'm eating 5 meals per day, 3 main meals and 2 smaller meals, and then my goal is to have 5 grams of fiber at each in one of those meals. Now, of course, there's going to be some meals that are going to be higher in fiber and some meals that are going to be a little bit lower. But that's my general rule of thumb, is focusing on 5 grams of fiber per meal. When I ran my Empower Her Challenge, all of the recipes in the Empower Her Challenge were a minimum of 5 grams of fiber, because again, I truly live and believe in this to help with gut health, but also to help with your bowels, because gut health is related to bowel health. And so when it comes to increasing your fiber intake, you want to do is you want to track how much fiber you're getting. So I am not a big encourager of tracking, right? I've tracked before, but I'm just too busy, but I've been able to track to see what has what in it. And I generally repeat the same meals, and I know that I'm getting enough fiber. I also know that I'm getting enough protein and fats. So for me, I'm beyond that. I no longer track my meals, but if that's something that you want to do, then I encourage you to do it. So first off, you're going to track your fiber. That's all I care about. So you're gonna look at every meal and say, okay, how much fiber is in this meal? And I want you to start tracking that just so you can see where you're starting at for your fiber intake, okay? Once you get that base number, I'd say do about 3 days of tracking to see how much fiber you're getting. And then you can decide, okay, on average, I'm getting maybe 15 grams of fiber. So I would say maybe try to increase that to 2 to 5 more grams per day. You don't want to go from like 10 grams of fiber per day up to 25 because you could actually do kind of like a reverse symptoms on yourself, and it could actually make you constipated or more backs up. So you want to pay attention to that. So first off, track it for 3 days, see where your fiber intake is at, and then after that, you increase little by little because again, we don't want to increase and then have some worsening issues. The other thing I want to mention is we want to aim for whole foods fiber. I don't want you reaching for the supplements. Unless your doctor specifically has you doing supplements, I want you to focus on whole foods because the more whole foods we go, the more we're going to support gut health and the more we're going to support bowel health as well. All right. So along with that, we need to make sure that our hydration is up. So we don't want to increase our fiber without increasing our hydration. So same thing with your fiber intake. I want you to pay attention to how much water you're drinking. The general rule of thumb is about half your body weight in water. However, if you're someone like me who works out often, you go in the sauna, you're sweating quite a bit, or maybe you live in a hotter state. I live in New York State, so it's very cold up here in the wintertime. So I'm sweating quite a bit. So I drink to thirst. I know I'm getting at least half my body weight in water because I use my big Awala for my workout, and I always drink at least one of those for my workout, and then I drink throughout the day, right? So I know I'm getting in my quality amount or quantity amount of water. But for you, I want you to track it. If you don't know how much water you're getting in, then I want you to start tracking it. And then I want you to also increase that because we don't want to increase our fiber without increasing our water content. Because then this can make you have harder stools, drier stool, and we don't want that, right? We want to have that nice, smooth stool. So that's the very first thing that we want to look at when it comes to rectocele prolapse and nutrition and constipation, because we want to make sure that we've mastered our nutrition, because a lot of women will say that they've mastered, that they eat enough fiber, that they're doing this, they're doing that. But then once you start tracking, you can actually see what you're actually consuming. So have a mix of, beans. I have beans almost every day. Fruits, have a serving of fruits. Raspberries are very high in fiber. Avocados are a healthy fat, but also high in fiber. Quinoa and oats are a great option as well. So I love, love, love my chickpea granola protein balls. So I've made sure to share that recipe down below. I have about 2 to 3 of them before my workout every day, and I absolutely love them. I can't live without them. But my goal is I always try to get in at least 1/4 cup of beans every single day. Beans or oats, I kind of switch back and forth, but for the recipe mixes it both. All right, so tackle your nutrition first, track it, and then slowly increase it little by little. So that's step number 1 when it comes to working with your prolapse and eliminating constipation. Okay, so step number 2 is looking at our daily habits. So we want to improve digestion, and the more we can improve digestion with our fiber and with our water, the more we can have those easier, smooth bowels. And so not only does what we eat affect our bowel movements, but also how we eat affects our bowel movements. So if you're someone like me who is very guilty of eating way too fast, you're gulping down your food. You are removing that first step to digestion. If you are just sucking down your food and you're not chewing it, you have missed an important piece of digestion. It is very important that we chew our food and we chew it slowly so that we start the process of digestion right inside of our mouth, right? So we want to make sure that we are eating more slowly. So for you, I would say start with 1 meal a day. So start whatever meal seems the calmest that you can commit to eat more slowly. I need to practice this myself, so I'm going to be practicing it right along with you. So breakfast is probably my least favorite time of day because we are busy. We're getting out the door and we're doing all the things. So for me, that's not the best time for me to focus on it. However, that would be a good time because it's the beginning of the day and you want to set the tone for the beginning of the day. So I should be an advocate for my own teachings. So I might try to do do lunch, right? Lunch is a little bit calmer. We finished our homeschool work for the day and we're kind of hanging out, right? So for me, I can sit down and actually chew my food. So I want you to choose one meal that you can sit down and chew your food about 20 times before swallowing, because this is the very start of your digestion. And you want to make sure that you don't skip that step, because that's going to help with your digestion, gut health, and bowel health. Okay. So that's step number one in our daily habits. Step number two, if you have the opportunity to get yourself to move gently after you're done eating, whether a walk with the family or a walk around your work building, or maybe you have a walking pad in your house, that would be step number two if you're able to get it. Any kind of movement, we want to make sure it's gentle because you just ate. So we don't want to disrupt your digestion, but we want to get the body moving, and that will help aid in digestion as well. Of course, I know not everyone's going to be able to do number two, but I always like to say it if you have the opportunity. It's not like a make or break, but this can certainly help with digestion and help get the bowels to move. All right. Step number three, or habit number three, is getting yourself into a routine. And I know that's going to be different for everyone. I am very fortunate that I am able to homeschool my children and I'm able to work from home. Very, very thankful for my husband in supporting me in that. And so my every morning looks the same. All right. So you want to get your body into a habit. So this is where tracking your bowel habits or your bowel journal is going to be important. How often are you going? Are you going every day, or is it every like 3 days? And not going every day doesn't necessarily mean that you're constipated. It just means that that's your schedule, right? But if you have these prolapse symptoms and they stem from your bowel movements, then we want to make sure that we are paying attention to how often we're going. So first off, track how many times you're going. Maybe you're going more than once a day. Track how many days you're going every week. So I go every day, TMI. Pretty much first thing in the morning. So you want to create a space, an environment, and a schedule for yourself. Our body, our minds love schedules, and so do our bowels. Our bowels love schedules. This is why when you travel or you go to somebody else's house, that you can't go to the bathroom, or you become irregular because your body is used to going in a certain bathroom in a certain place at a certain time. And so the more we can be consistent with that same place and time, the more you can become more regular. So again, I know it's hard for some people, but try your best. Okay. So if that means waking up a little bit earlier in the morning, because you know that typically you are able to go in the morning, or that's when your schedule is, that's my schedule for me, then you want to create the space for that to happen. And so if you have something going on that day, like next Monday, for example, I have a daughter's appointment. She's a doctor's appointment. So I'm going to be a little anxious because my ex-husband's going to be there, and it's just going to be one of those days where like, I know I'm already going to be anxious. And so when we're anxious and we're stressed, we typically don't go to the bathroom. So I'm going to give myself a little bit more grace period in the morning to allow my body to relax and go to the bathroom. So be proactive in that when it comes to, your daily habits and your daily routine. All right. So that is step number three, is just paying attention to, a routine and providing that environment for yourself for your routine. And then number four is paying attention to your stress levels, because when you're stressed, this prevents the body from being able to go, right? So when we are stressed, when cortisol rises, so our cortisol does rise with working out, right? But it's that up and down, right? So it goes up and then it comes down. And that's how our cortisol levels should fluctuate. We should have an up and down. But if you're highly stressed, maybe you're taking care of an elderly parent, maybe you're taking care of a nephew, or there's a work stress, or maybe you're going through a divorce, or whatever the case may be. Maybe you're dealing with teenagers. I don't know. Whatever that stressor is, then you have that constant state of cortisol happening in your system. And when we have that constant state of cortisol, all non-essential functions shut down, which can mean your digestion shuts down, right? And so that's why it's really important to reduce or increase stress management strategies to help allow your body to calm down and not hold on to so much tension, because this can actually prevent you from having good bowel health and having good gut health, which can then lead to worsening of your prolapse symptoms. Okay. So those are four things you want to look at. And then we'll talk about bathroom habits and the pelvic floor itself next. Okay, so I've seen 5 different pelvic floor PTs. I have a rectocele prolapse and a cystocele prolapse, and I was peeing my pants down past my knees. And of the 5 pelvic floor PTs, it wasn't until my 5th PT that did an internal assessment of my rectum. And why this is so important is because if your pelvic floor is tight, so your pelvic floor sits at the bowl of your pelvis, right? And if you have tightness that's pulling that tailbone under, that's going to disrupt your bowel movements, right? Because think about it, your stool sits or your rectum sits right here. And if this is in the way because it's locked down because of pelvic floor tightness, you're not going to get that smooth transition of allowing the stool to come all the way out. And so that's why looking at constipation when in relative to pelvic floor muscles is very important because as you know, with a rectocele prolapse, most of the time it's because of constipation, chronic constipation. And so we want to make sure that we address the pelvic floor itself when it comes to constipation. So I would encourage you, if you are comfortable, it can be super awkward, uncomfortable. I totally get it, but it is truly a game changer. If you can have your pelvic floor PT do a rectal exam. This is their job, right? This is what they do. They've seen it all. So don't be embarrassed. It's only going to help you. So when she did the internal exam of me, I was extremely, extremely tight. I was holding on to so much tension in my rectum, and I still do occasionally today. And so we talked about it, and it wasn't that I needed to do internal release of the pelvic floor muscles. I needed to do internal release of the rectum. So she supported me in getting me a small dilator to do internal release with just having it sit in there while I was nice and relaxed. Okay. So make sure that you talk with your pelvic floor PT and ask them to do a rectal exam. And if they're not able or they're not comfortable, because some of them might not do rectal exams, then ask for a referral for someone who does. Because the more you know about your rectum, especially if you are having constipation and especially if you are still having prolapse or rectocele prolapse symptoms, it's important to know what the rectum is doing, right? So work with your pelvic floor PT in regards to that, but then also coming into play with our stress management strategies because the stress can lock down the posterior chain, right? When we are stressed, then we tend to put it into our pelvic floor. So just like you might have a knot in your shoulder, you gotta have knots in your pelvic floor. So stress goes inside, or that's not the word I was trying to say. Stress goes along with tightness in the pelvic floor. So whether you do internal release, the rectal release, or with the massage ball, you also need to match it with stress management skills or stress management skills because it's going to come back. And it does. Like today, I still have to do some release work because I get stressed out sometimes and I can feel my pelvic floor tightening and tensing up. The other thing you want to be mindful of is glute clenching, right? So tucking that tailbone, squeezing the glutes. We want to be really mindful of that. So just paying attention to your glutes throughout the day. I actually have another video on glutes. So make sure you go watch that because there's some awesome tips in there and exercises that you can do to help open up the back because we should be able to have that opening in the back so that when we go to sit on the toilet, we can then have a good smooth bowel movement. Okay, so let's talk about that next. Okay, so I'm not going to take you in the bathroom because I think that might be a little too intimate. So I'm just going to show you right here and pretend like I'm sitting on a toilet. Number one, we want to make sure that we're not hovering on the toilet because when you hover over the toilet, whether you're trying to go at number 2 or number 1, your pelvic floor is contracting, right? So you're hovering over and the pelvic floor is trying to lift up. So your pelvic floor needs to let go so that your stool and your urine can come out quickly and smoothly, right? So we want to make sure that we are nice and relaxed and we're not holding anything in when it comes to going to the bathroom. Number 2 is using a step stool. If you're not already using a stool, then you need to go run to Target and get yourself a stool. My youngest daughter, she was so funny. She might be mad for me for saying this. She was like, Mom, how am I supposed to go number 2 at Target when there's no stool? I'm like, you use a stool? I've been like harassing my family to use a step stool, and I'll tell you why in a second, to go number 2. And so I have one in each bathroom in the house. And she was like, yeah, I can't not use a stool. I'm like, I'm so proud of you, baby girl. I was so proud of her. It was a proud mom moment. Anyway, all right. So the reason that we use a stool is because the knees When we place our feet on the stool, it elevates our knees up above our hips. And the idea is that when we elevate our knees up above our hips, it helps to open up this back space, which then allows the rectum to smooth out, right? So the rectum is got some kinks. It can have some kinks in it, but when you have this position, it helps to lengthen it out so then your stool can come out more smoothly. But unfortunately, what happens with a rectocele prolapse is if you've been chronically constipated for some time or you've been constipated as a kid, the rectum has stretched out, right? And so the signals in your rectum to tell your brain that it's time to go might take a little bit longer to let your body know that it's time to go. And so even more reason why we need to focus on knees above the hips so that it can help lengthen out or straighten out the rectum so that the stool can come out more smoothly, especially if you've been constipated as a child. Like I said, then that has basically stretched out the rectum, just like your belly would stretch out from having babies. And then this can kind of keep the stool from coming out. So number one is you want to make sure that you use your stool every bathroom in your house. Again, if you're traveling, this is going to be a little bit harder. A trash can, you can use a trash can to place your feet on. They do have some travel step stool things, but I have yet to buy them. But just little things like that. Get creative. Did you know, fun fact, in Korea, so my ex-husband was stationed in Korea, and at this time, I had no idea. They have no toilets. They literally have a hole in the ground. And so the way that they literally go to the bathroom is by squatting. So we're in a squat position, right? And that is optimal for bowel and bladder health. So we want to make sure we support our body in that position so that it can go in a more efficient pattern. All right. So number 2 or 3, I don't even know where we're at, but you want to make sure that you're not straining or pushing your stool out. This is unnatural and we shouldn't have to do this. Now, a couple reasons why you might have to do this is maybe because of you have the prolapse, the rectocele prolapse, and your stool got stuck, or maybe because it's really hard, a hard stool, and this is where hydration comes into play. So you want to pay attention to that stool. You want to pay attention to that when we're on the toilet, that we're not pushing, we're not bearing down, and we're not straining to get our stool out. So we want to pay attention to those urges. So when you have to go to the bathroom, when your body sends that ping that it's time to go, I want you to go right then and there. It's not that you have to really rush off to the bathroom, but your body is telling you it's time to go. And have you ever had to go to the bathroom and you didn't go, and then like 10 minutes later or 5 minutes later, you didn't go right away and then you didn't have to go anymore, right? And then it leads to worsening symptoms. So we really want to make sure, especially with the rectocele prolapse, that we're paying attention to our body's cue and we're going as we are able to go. I know there are some situations where you just can't go, right? And that's inevitable. It's going to happen. But for the most part, please pay attention to those body cues and to the bathroom as soon as you have those cues. Another thing you want to think about, especially if you are struggling and it's not just coming right out, is we want to focus on our breath, right? So when we inhale, as long as there's no tension in the pelvic floor, when we inhale, the pelvic floor should descend down. So our pelvis here, so when we inhale, our inlet, our pelvic inlet is the top of the pelvis, opens up, and the bottom of the pelvis kind of closes. But as you can see, this string here is the pelvic floor muscles. And so what it's doing, as you inhale, so the pressure goes down, opens up the top of the pelvis, the bottom of the pelvis almost like closes off, but that helps the pelvic floor to descend down and relax. And then as you exhale, it goes more into a internal rotation and lifts the pelvic floor. So our pelvic floor naturally responds to our breath. And so that's why we want to think about our breathing when it comes to constipation and being on the toilet. So you want to inhale into your pelvic bowl, and then with your exhale, you want it to be gentle, because if you're forceful with your exhale, that's going to activate the pelvic floor more. So instead of being forceful with our exhale, you want to think about having an open throat. So keeping that throat as open as you can, that's going to help keep the bottom open as well to support the stool coming out. So you're going to inhale through your nose and then exhale, open mouth. And that's going to help kind of continue to allow the pelvic floor to open up instead of lifting up like it normally would. So give that a try. You can also think about blowing out a candle, but again, you want to make sure that the throat is open, everything is relaxed. Blowing out a candle, or like those windmill things, you could think about blowing out the windmill. just making sure that you have that open throat. All right, so give those tips a try. I know this was a longer video. I apologize. This is such a passion of mine because the rectocele prolapse was the number one thing that really made me feel very broken, right? I had diastasis recti, I had leaking past my knees, I have a cystocele prolapse, but it was the rectocele prolapse that really, I felt like, destroyed me emotionally and mentally. And I do still get flare ups occasionally, but for the most part, I'm able to manage it where I don't get flare ups based on my daily habits and my nutrition. And, for example, I don't drink alcohol anymore. I've chosen to give that up because it really disrupts my bowel health. And I said it wasn't worth it for me anymore. I also felt convicted by the Lord to not drink anymore. And it's been the best decision that I've ever made. So make sure you check out the comments below, or not the comments, but the caption below to find more information. I'd love to hear what else you would like to learn so I can continue to create content for you. And if you're looking for a mapped out all access plan for prolapse healing and strength training, make sure to check out the all access membership where you can dive into my 12-week core lift program specific to prolapse, leaking, and lifting. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.